and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Later on our show, State Assemblyman Anthony Rendon talks about what he hopes to accomplish as the new speaker. Also, a court order has many California parents worried about the privacy of their children's school records. And author Caroline Paul talks about her new book on the importance of girls taking risks. But first, this week, health officials confirmed additional cases of Zika virus in the Bay Area, including a pregnant woman in Napa County and a San Francisco resident. Today, we learned that statewide there have been 8 cases of Zika confirmed this year. All are travel-related. The virus is mainly transmitted through the bite of a particular species of mosquito and has been linked to birth defects. Last month, the World Health Organization declared Zika virus a worldwide emergency. Joining me now with more is Lisa Aliferis, editor of KQED State of Health blog. Lisa, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Thuy.
So just off the top, what are the current conditions of the infected pregnant woman in Napa and the San Francisco resident?
So Napa County health officials are saying that the woman has already recovered from her infection, and that is really all the information they would release. As for the San Francisco resident, all the health officials would say is it's a person who is not pregnant. They would not disclose whether it was a man or a woman.
So do these 2 local cases pose a threat to public health?
As the health officials were very clear in both counties, the specific mosquito, which is Aedes aegypti, which can spread Zika virus, is only in very limited places in California. It is not present in either San Francisco or Napa counties. It is present in, I believe it's Menlo Park and Hayward, but it has very limited range in California right now.
Right now, but do we need to worry about the mosquitoes eventually carrying that virus?
It is, there is an expectation that Zika will continue to be brought in from other countries, from travelers. There is, of course, the possibility that it could be spread by these mosquitoes. At present, though, there is no current risk of that, no public health risk.
What are the estimates for here in California and across the U.S.? Are officials expected to see many more cases?
There is an expectation that, like West Nile before it, West Nile virus, which was first brought in I believe, the late 90s and was spread from there, there's an expectation that, especially with this summer, as many people around the world will be traveling to Brazil for the Olympics and then returning home, that we will see more cases, that it will start to gain a foothold in the United States. But here in the United States, we have things that other parts of the world do not have. Many buildings have air conditioning. People have screens on their windows. The whole infrastructure of our society is at a higher level, and so the Zika virus is less likely to be spread. We have less of the Aedes mosquito here, but it is still expected, with some experts that I've spoken to in the last couple of days, that it is expected that it will start to be spread.
So what are the health risks associated with Zika?
Most people will not even know they've been infected. So 80% of people are asymptomatic. People who do show symptoms, they're pretty mild. It's mild rash, joint pain, conjunctivitis, or red eyes. The real risk is with pregnant women, and just recently released is a study. It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, showing that of 88 women who were tested, 88 pregnant women who were tested with ultrasounds in Brazil, 29% were showing fetuses with this abnormally small head. So there's what they're calling the strongest evidence to date that Zika does dramatically increase this risk of this birth defect. So there's more evidence coming out, but the World Health Organization is still holding back on saying there's a definitive connection. Given that, why do you think they were so fast to declare a worldwide emergency last month? There's no question that so what the public health term is that it was a native population, a population that was that no one had ever had this. There's no immunity built up, and it was just spreading through Brazil and then on rapidly into these other countries across Central America, into Mexico and the Caribbean. And there was this connection with Zika. There was this belief in it, and this belief that it was raising the rate of these birth defects, and they wanted to investigate further. I want to add that there's also an association with Guillain-Barré, that people who become infected infected are at higher risk of Guillain-Barré. This is a disorder that can lead to partial paralysis. People do recover, but I mean, some people end up on ventilators, on breathing machines. It can be very serious. It's only a small risk of death, but still people can spend a long time in the hospital with that.
And as far as pregnant women are concerned, is there any distinction between whether women are infected in the first trimester or later on in their pregnancy?
This is the subject of, everything about Zika is the subject of intense scrutiny right now, intense scientific scrutiny. And right now there's just a lot we don't know. I mean, we just have this recently published study that really draws this pretty conclusive connection. But there is a tremendous effort scientifically. There's a lot of research going on.
So we don't know if you're infected in the first trimester, whether the symptoms or the health risks will be much more severe than in the third trimester.
And Zika can be sexually transmitted. So this is men who are infected and come back. Was already a case in Texas where he infected his partner. So then then we don't know exactly how long the virus stays in the semen. So there's also a recommendation first that pregnant women should not travel to Zika-infected countries, and that if their sexual partner has been infected, that they should use a condom every time they have sex for many months.
Okay. Well, definitely take those precautions. So many unanswered questions. Lisa, thanks for coming in.
Good to be here, Thuy.
Sensitive information about more than 10 million California students is set to be released under a controversial court order. It stems from a lawsuit over the rights of disabled children. A district court judge in Sacramento says the State Department of Education must turn over the records, including Social Security numbers, to attorneys of a parents group that filed the suit. The case is raising privacy concerns statewide. Joining us now is San Francisco Chronicle education reporter Jill Tucker, who has been covering this story. Jill, good to see you.
Hi.
So give us a backgrounder. What is this lawsuit about?
Well, the lawsuit is actually about special education children and whether the state is fulfilling its duty to oversee what these children are entitled to and to take action if districts are not providing those services. And of course, the parents out of Morgan Hill that initiated this are claiming that the students are not getting the services that they need. The districts are not providing all the resources that they should be. Now, that's what the actual lawsuit's about. But what the argument has been about, what all the legal battles over the last 3 years have been about, are getting the plaintiffs the information that they need so they can prove their case throughout the state. This is now a class action lawsuit, and they want access to the records at the state of every child that has attended a public school in California since 2008, and that's about 10 million kids.
So under Judge Kimberly Mueller's order, what kinds of student information will be released?
So the plaintiffs have asked for information so that they can search and sort not just special education students, including their health records, their behavior records, their academic records, everything from grades to whether they were suspended. And they want to be able to search that. And the judge has said, yeah, you can get that information. The question now is, how do they get that information? Because frankly, the State Department of Education and many parents do not want their children's Social Security numbers and addresses and other information going into the hands of people outside of the state government.
So if you're a parent and you don't want this information to be released in this way, is there anything that they can do?
Well, now initially, the judge in February ordered notices to be put out that parents could submit a form objecting to their child's information being released in this lawsuit. So,
is it an opt-out form?
Well, so that's what many people thought. That's what many district officials thought. They posted it on their sites, and parents en masse have submitted these forms, believing them to be opt-out forms. However, the judge had the option of making it just an objection or an opt-out. Because of the number of objection forms that she has received in the mail, in her office, she has said that she cannot review them individually, and that means now, as of this ruling on Tuesday, that there is no longer an opt-out option for parents. They can still protest, they can still object, but their form is going to go into a big box, sealed up, and go into a protected room.
So what is the point then of filing this form and objecting if it goes into some dark space somewhere and no one looks at it?
Well, the judge did say that based on the number of forms that she received, she has acknowledged the concern that parents have for their children's privacy, and she has tightened up the security surrounding the release of this information. So for some of the most sensitive information, the plaintiffs have to go to the State Department of Ed. The information will not leave essentially the building. And so they have to conduct their searches there rather than putting it on a thumb drive or however they were going to transfer it to the plaintiffs. So the State Department of Ed feels that this does keep the information more secure, but the reality is a court can allow attorneys to access sensitive information. They're allowed to do that, and frankly, at this point, there's no option for parents to opt out of that.
Well, it's my understanding that fewer than 10 people on the plaintiff's side will see this information. But again, how do you keep that information safe? They will have all this sensitive data, including Social Security numbers. What guarantees are in place?
Well, the judge has put several protective orders in place in terms of a special magistrate, a special security person that they have brought into the case to ensure that the data is completely secure. But as we all know, all those security measures, whether it's at a department store or online, has not ever fully prevented the leak of information or access from hackers or other folks.
So this actually touches on the broader issue of data security, right? We're living in an era where lots of information about students is stored on multiple computers at school districts, at district and state offices. How safe is that information?
Well, I think that raises some serious questions. I mean, we all fill out our forms, our emergency contact forms and all the papers that we turn in, and we turn it in often to a school secretary. That information is filed away at the school, at the district, at the state, and a lot of people have access to that information. I'm not saying it's not secure, but I think that there's certainly whatever information we have, whether it's our bank accounts, Social Security numbers, or children's information, I think that there are big questions of how safe this information is.
Does the State Department of Education have a team in place that focuses just on that, protecting the data?
They do. Every department does. Every district does. They all have security teams. But, we've seen some of the biggest corporations in the nation with some of the best security experts.
Target, Amazon.
Leak our information. So, you get those notices in the mail that your information has been compromised. I think it's a little scarier when we're talking about children, and I think that that's why we've seen such a gut reaction from parents out in the community. They do not want their child's address and Social Security number in the hands of anyone that shouldn't have it.
So real quickly, what happens next in this lawsuit?
So the attorneys are still negotiating how they're going to get this information. The State Department of Ed is still vigorously fighting this lawsuit, and they don't want to turn over any information. So I think there's still a little bit of a battle. No information has been turned over to date. So
but the legal wrangling continues.
Absolutely, and we'll be on top of that.
All right, Jill Tucker, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, next week, a new era is set to begin in Sacramento as Assemblyman Anthony Rendon is sworn in as the 70th Speaker of the California Assembly. With new term limits that allow Assembly members to remain in office for up to 12 years, Rendon has the potential to remain as Speaker for the better part of a decade. Senior political reporter Scott Shafer sat down with the Speaker-elect to learn more about the man who has landed one of the state's most powerful jobs.
All in favor of electing Assemblymember Anthony Rendon as the 70th Speaker of the California State Assembly, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Speaker-elect Rendon, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
People outside of your district may not know you as well as they do down in Los Angeles. What should people know about you? Who are you?
Grew up in Southern California. I'm no stranger to the Bay Area, though. I lived in San Francisco for a couple of years. Worked in Oakland. I'm a native son of California. Went to the state's community college system, Cal State system, UC system. So I'm somebody who knows California, has really benefited from the state's institutions.
Looking at your bio, and by your own admission, you were not exactly a fast starter in high school. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
I think I read that your grade point average in high school was 0.83. That was you saying that.
Yeah. Right.
So what happened?
I was not a very engaged student. I didn't grow up in a community where the schools were all that great, to be honest. I grew up in a community where I don't think education was valued that highly. I didn't know a lot of people when I graduated who went to college. I used to take the bus past a community college every morning, 8 a.m. after working the graveyard shift. and I'd look out and I'd see the kids going into school, and tuition was $5 a semester back then, the community college system. It's a very, very different reality. So I benefited from that.
So what was it that shifted, or who was it that got you motivated to start thinking about college and getting serious about education?
I think it was a couple of things. I had an older sister who did go to college. She was the first in our family to go to college, so she certainly played a significant role. When I was 19, 20 years old, I'd never read a book in my life, cover to cover. And I remember she kept putting a copy of Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. She put it in my room. I saw it. I didn't know what it was. It was just on my desk. And the next day she moved it to my nightstand, and it was getting closer and closer. And the next day it was on top of my pillow, and I thought I better pick this up and read it because obviously she's trying to send me a message. So it was that type of sort of positive role model that had an impact.
So Dostoevsky was the very first book you've read? That's a little intimidating.
Brothers K, yeah, it was. The interesting thing was it turned out it was actually an abridged version of that book. So she made me read the complete version the next year.
The ayes have it.
What have you learned growing up in a working class family that you're going to take with you in this new job as Speaker?
The job of being an assembly member, the job of being a legislator can be very abstract. We deal in huge and we deal with programs, not with people. We deal with, in terms of billions of dollars. To have those sort of real life experiences, not only in my family growing up, but also running nonprofit organizations for 20 years. So to be able to hearken back to those memories, to those families that we served is something that's really valuable to me, I think.
You are taking over as Speaker after years and years of a revolving door of speakerships because of term limits. You could be around for quite a while. So what's on your short list of things to accomplish?
Certainly addressing poverty and sort of various mechanisms for dealing with poverty. It's something that, as a Democrat, I believe we haven't done a good job of talking about at all, let alone dealing with. So I'm going to look at things like the minimum wage is something that's very important to me. Healthcare is something that's very important to me. Addressing the housing crisis is very important to me as well. Specific to the minimum wage, more than half of California is already at $15 because of various local ordinances. It just doesn't seem fair to some communities that they pay higher wages than others. So if anything, getting the entire state to $15 an hour is just sort of something that'll level the playing field for businesses.
Although if you're a business in Fresno, you would say, well, my workers don't have the same cost of living as, say, your constituents do in Southern California. Should there be a kind of regionally different minimum wages?
Those who represent Fresno, those who represent Bakersfield have made those arguments, so it's certainly something we're going to look at. We're not close to the idea at all.
And when you're a legislator, there are always people with lots of money, lobbyists, business interests, trying to distract you from some of those goals and trying to get you to think about issues the way they want you to.
Yep.
How are you going to keep your eye on the ball?
I represent 9 cities. I represent the city of Linwood, which a couple of years ago had the second highest unemployment rate in the country, just behind Pontiac, Michigan. So if you keep focusing back, not on the lobbyists who are in your office, but on the people back in the district, I think that's who we're here to serve.
So when you become Speaker, both leaders in the legislature, you and Kevin De Leon, the Senate President Pro Tem, are going to be Latino men from Southern California. What's the significance of that?
It's significant because it's the first time it's happened. The second question we should be asking is it good? And Kevin and I are people who work with every caucus. We're people who work with diverse communities.
There are some folks up north who might think their interests aren't going to be addressed by two leaders from Southern California. What would you say to them?
The water bond is a perfect example of that. If there's anything in California that divides us in any way, but particularly north-south, it's the issue of water. People kept saying there's no way you're going to be able to get a water bond through. I authored the water bond. We worked on it for 18 months, and we were able to get it through.
The Latino caucus has grown tremendously in the past 20 years. It's really eclipsed the African-American caucus, and there's some tension between those two groups in the legislature and in Congress as well in California. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's interesting. There was a story recently in the Sacramento Bee where it said ethnic tension ripping apart the assembly. And it was a picture of me hugging an African-American man who I've endorsed for Congress, who's endorsed me in every single office I've ever run for. I think a lot of that is overplayed. Thank you again for the honor you have given me.
You're becoming Speaker at a time when there's a lot of anger among voters. We hear it in the presidential election. We've seen it at the convention here in San Jose. People want bankers to go to jail and that kind of thing. What can you say to those folks that you're going to be looking out for them as well, the people who feel left out?
So I think a lot of those questions, a lot of the issues relating to anger, totally understood, totally understandable. It's our job to address those through oversight and through legislation.
And last question, what do you do for fun?
What I do for fun, I'm a big runner. I like to listen to music. I love art. My first job was in a contemporary art museum, and I love to read.
What kind of music do you like?
Music, I like punk.
Punk, you're like a Renaissance man.
Yeah, I have various interests.
Speaker-elect Rendon, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
She's fought fires, flown planes, and scaled the Golden Gate Bridge. In her new book, The Gutsy Girl, Caroline Paul recounts some of her most memorable adventures and mishaps. And she's now passing along the lessons she's learned to help young girls conquer their fears. And she joins me now. Welcome, Caroline.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Of course, I was reading your book and you detail the various adventures you've had, from climbing the Golden Gate Bridge to scuba diving as a firefighter. You spent a large part of your career as a firefighter, but scuba diving for searching for a dead body in the bay. And you write about all this in a really light, breezy style intended for girls ages 7 to 11. Why that particular age group?
Well, I think we sort of overlook that age group when we're talking about helping. We have a lot of books for teens now and about teens, and a lot of books for women, Lean In, Play Big. So this is an age group we haven't really talked to yet. And also, they're at the perfect age now, before they hit the pressures of having to look really pretty and having to be very nice and having to be perfect. And that they still want to do the rough and tumble things. So I think this is the time where they'll listen to a book like this.
You were one of the first women in the San Francisco Fire Department. This was back in 1989, right? How did you get into that, and what was that experience like?
Well, I loved being a firefighter. It so appealed to the adventurous side, and I saw so many men and women being brave, and it was a great life lesson because you were with people at some of the most important times of their life. They were often sick or dying, or their house was on fire.
But you studied communications at Stanford. You were going to be a journalist. How did that pivot happen from that to firefighting?
Well, it was pretty abrupt. I actually worked at a radio station in Berkeley, and there was a lot of stories coming across my desk at the time about the racism and sexism in the fire department. So I thought I would do an undercover story. And I went and took the test. And, well, first of all, racism and sexism is never that obvious. You can't really pinpoint it in the time it takes to take a test. So I had no story. But I realized as I was going through the procedure, in the process, that it really, really suited my personality. It was obviously an exciting, adventurous life.
But were there experiences that you experienced as a firefighter in the way people treated you or addressed you that prompted you to write this book?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there were definitely questions about a woman's physical ability to do this job, and which I completely understood, because up until that point, a lot of women had not been encouraged to do physical things. So there was a lot of good reason for that. Title IX had just come about in the 70s, so we didn't have a good bench of really fit women. So I understood that. I myself was very fit. I was an Olympic hopeful in a luge, and I had been a rower in college. But what really surprised me was when people questioned my courage and the fact that I wanted to be as brave as the men and do dangerous things. And I think that helped prompt me to write the book, because in fact, women are brave.
Well, in fact, you wrote a New York Times op-ed on this issue about how girls are conditioned to be fearful and how that sets girls back. How are girls being conditioned to fear things and be scared?
Well, I think, they have studies that show that we caution our girls way more than we do our boys. And they actually had a study that used a fire pole, ironically, where it showed that moms and dads both cautioned their daughters against using the pole. And if the daughters still decided they want to play on the equipment, the parents were way more likely to help them. Whereas with their sons, they simply encourage their sons to try something new and do it on their own.
So then, how does that manifest itself later in life, do you think, that fearful nature?
Well, I think you grow up thinking that you can't necessarily do things for yourself. And you also use fear a lot as a reason not to do things because, you know, parents are just trying to protect their kids. And so I completely sympathize with that. But they're also trying to protect their boys. So why are they treating their girls differently? And it seems that we have an inner bias that girls are more fragile than boys, especially at that age. And the irony is, developmentally, girls are actually stronger or as strong and as able as boys.
So then how do we go about correcting that?
Well, I think as parents, we need to look at our biases and see that we really do treat our girls differently than boys, because I think that will come as a surprise. But I remember years ago, friends of mine lamented that their girl was a scaredy cat. And after that, I noticed that the parents were actually the ones constantly telling her, no, don't do that, be careful. And so they were sort of instilling this idea that everything was scary. And with boys, what we do is we ask them to access their bravery. And I think that the world is the same for girls and boys, but we ask the boys to access their bravery. Let's start doing that with girls.
Very interesting. Well, let's take another look at your book here. I'm sure you wouldn't mind that.
No.
Her book is The Gutsy Girl. And do you have any readings coming up locally? It just came out this week, your book.
Yes, it did. Yes, I'm reading tomorrow at the Booksmith, which is Saturday. And then
in the Haight in San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then next week in Corte Madera.
And just real quickly, a fun bit of trivia about you. You have a twin sister.
Yeah.
And she's an actress.
Yes.
Was she on Baywatch?
Yes, she was, yeah.
So if you look familiar to all the
That's
folks out
why.
there, that
Yep,
might be why.
Exactly. You can congratulate her on her new book.
Yes, that's right. Caroline Paul, good to have you in.
Thank you so much, Thuy.
I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for watching. For all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.